Okay, I think slowly everybody who wanted to enter has entered. So let us start, I suggest. And I'd like to start by welcoming all of you. Welcome to this lecture series that is called Decolonial and Postcolonial Ecologies, Critical Voices from India. Today's lecture is by Professor Raghuramaraju from IIT Tirupati, and it's the first of the series. It is titled Examining the Relationship Between Women and Death, Revisiting Savitri, a Legend and a Symbol. So the lecture will go on for approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes Q&A. So you'll be invited to either write your question in the chat, or you have the possibility to ask yourself. You can unmute yourself. Please do not unmute yourself before the Q&A session. And please note also that this session is already recorded, which means that if you leave your video on, you might appear on the recording. So just a few words before we start on the lecture series and on Professor Raghuramaraju. This lecture series will take place once a month until October, so today is the first. It's organized by Pooja Ghosh, Michael Stadler, and myself, and it takes place in the larger context of the Decolonial Anthropology Research Project, led by Dr. Daesung Park, financed by the National Research Foundation of Korea, and hosted by Seoul National University. And so I take just 1 minute or 1 second to thank also Dr. Park for the opportunity for us to introduce Decolonial Voices from India and the opportunity to organize this lecture series. You can find more information on the project on the website, which was in the poster, and maybe we'll put it in the chat if you want to have a look. And so today we welcome Professor Raghuramaraju, and we are very happy to welcome Professor Raghuramaraju to open this lecture series. It's a very nice honor to have him. He is professor at IIT Tirupati. He's a very enthusiastic writer and a compiler of contemporary Indian philosophy in English and in Telugu. He worked on a wide range of authors, on Vadira Chandidas, on Gandhi, on his grandson Ramchandra Gandhi, on Vivekananda, on Deleuze and Guattari, on the state and problems of contemporary Indian philosophy, and many more. Today he will present for us something on Aurobindo and the ecologies of Aurobindo. He is the author of a column in The Telegraph, and he published almost 20 books and more than 50 articles, among which I just quote a few. Debates in Indian Philosophy, Classical, Colonial, and Contemporary in 2006, and During Colonialism, Classical Presence, and Modern Absences in Indian Philosophy in 2009, Philosophy in India, Ancestors, Outsiders, and Predecessors in 2013, Modern Frames and Pre-Modern Themes in Indian Philosophy, Border, Self, and Others in 2017, and Calibrating Western Philosophy for India, Rousseau, Derrida, Deleuze, Guattari, and Vadira Chandidas in 2019. And you'll have many more available, of course, on internet if you're interested. So before we start, we thank you so much, Professor Raghuramaraju, for being here today online with us. It's always a great pleasure to listen to you and to learn from you. And I take my pen and I leave you the Zoom floor.
My time starts now. I thank Elise Coquerel, Pooja Ghosh, and Michael Stadler for this kind invitation, and Elise for the generous introduction. I'm tense on two accounts. One, I'm still not very capable of handling technology. And second is the very nature of the problem. When Elise asked me to speak on in this series, I have to reread Sri Aurobindo's Savitri just to see what are the ecological dimensions that are there in this text. And I wanted to start with this very poignant 2 lines, which actually I will come back at the end. And they are, Savitri A pang cleaves through my head and breast as if the axe were piercing it and not the living branch. So this is what Satyavan tells Savitri, where he's trying to draw parallel between the destruction of the environment and how that will replicate in human beings. I'll come back to this, but I thought that I will, read these two lines from Sri Aurobindo's epic Savitri, the legendary Legend of the Simba. I want to start by asking the question, why Savitri from the epic Mahabharata in a talk series focusing on conversations on the themes of deep post-colonial thought, ecological concerns, and feminist interventions. I will attempt to provide some reasons for discussing Savitri. To begin with, there are two ways of looking at those who fit into feminism and those who don't. While the former is eulogized, the latter is rejected. I want to begin with the latter and revisit to explore the status of a woman character like Savitri in the Mahabharata. I want to begin with the mortality of human beings, more specifically, the engagement of human beings with death. Let me state the distinguishing feature of Savitri to answer the question, why Savitri? A distinguishing feature of birth and death is that both elude first-person experience, a possible reason for death's mystery. However, the reception of death can vary across cultures. For instance, the portrayal of death in Bergman's film, The Seventh Seal, based on his play Wood Painting, differs significantly from the depiction of death in the tale Savitri in the epic Mahabharata. The film's first conversation, set against the devastation of plague in medieval Sweden, is between death and the protagonist, Antonio Block, knight. While returning from the Crusades, the disillusioned knight finds the country devastated by the plague. He challenges death to play chess, hoping to use the game to delay his demise. Towards the end, Block returns to his castle with his fellow travelers and is received by his wife, Karin. She begins reading from the book of Revelation about the opening of the seven seals by the Lamb. As she finishes reading about the third angel, death appears. In the last scene, Joff, an actor, reports to his wife Mia about seeing death dancing with Block, Jones, and other travelers. But Mia dismisses this as a dream, and that is one of the very interesting and intriguing features of the film. In the film, death, despite being inescapable, comes disguised as a priest to Block's confession to surreptitiously and deceitfully find out about the tactics being planned by the knight. Hearing from Block that he uses combination of bishop and a knight, that shows, and I quote, his face at the grill of the confession both for a moment, but disappears instantly, unquote. Thus we have Block, the male protagonist, and an upright king knight contending with the morally tainted death. Savitri, after the death of her husband, pursues the Lord of Death with persistent request to bring her dead husband, Satyavan, back to life. Yama does not relent, as this is against the divine norm, the dharma. However, as compensation, he bestows 3 boons, anything except the life of Satyavan. For the third and the last boon, Savitri asks that she be the mother of 100 sons. As soon as Emma grants the wish, she reminds him that she cannot bear children without her husband. Finding out the trap, Emma, being honorable, concedes that Satyavan must be restored to life if the boon is to be fulfilled, and grants her request. The distinguishing feature of the tale from Mahabharata is the combination of women and death, where the former wins over the later. We rarely find this combination in the world literature. There is Alcestis, the princess of Greek mythology, who is known for her love of her husband. However, her story is different. In contrast to Block, who is a man in conversation with death, who finally consumes the farmer, the tale from Mahabharata, we have that in the tale from Mahabharata, we have Savitri, a woman who is in dialogue with the Lord of Death, Raghuramaraju. Furthermore, unlike in the film, Savitri wins over death. In addition, unlike in the case of the film, in the legend, death does not cheat, but stands for dharma, righteousness. The uniqueness of Savitri lies not only in being a woman, but also in her ability to engage with and win the battle of wits against the death. Further, at one level, her seeking male children as a third bone can smack of promoting patriarchy. However, at another level, she can be seen as central to the lives of two types of men. Her husband, who gets his life back because of her, and her male children, who would not have been born without her clever request. There is also another male, Yama, the god of death, against whom she wins the argument. All this goes to show the centrality of Savitri. These are the reasons for discussing Savitri, at least if not only the only unique woman character in the world literature, as at least one amongst others. But there is a problem here. The problem is, despite the distinguishing feature of Savitri, a careful reflection reveals that the film is perhaps closer to reality than Savitri's story. That is, Savitri is unique but remains mythological, unreal, fictitious. Sri Aurobindo's modern rendering of Savitri and other characters in his epic poem Savitri, a legend and a symbol, can be used to make subtle but substantial changes in addressing this difference. He transforms Savitri's story into a symbol, thus making it universal. Through this symbolic nature of the epic poem, he portrays Satyavan as an embodiment of divine truth of being within one's itself, who has, however, descended into the grip of death and ignorance. On the other hand, Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who descends to earth and is boon to save. Ashwapati, her human father, symbolizes concentrated spiritual energy that helps us to raise from mortal to immortal planes. Dhumnaksena, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind, here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision. Through that loss, its kingdom of glory. Aurobindo concludes that the tale is not merely an allegory. The characters are emanations of living and conscious force. In his rendering, the fantastical nature of the mythology is considerably modified and brought closer to reality, thus this making the story more relatable for readers. Further, as a symbol, the epic has considerably reduced the mythological character associated with legend. It makes it contemporarily relevant. I want to make use of this provision in this paper, though differently. So Savitri is not only unique, but in Aurobindo's rendering acquires contemporary relevance. So having made the point that why I have chosen to discuss Savitri under the theme feminism, now I want to move towards the second theme of this project, namely decolonialism. Savitri and decolonialism. Let me now turn to the relationship between Savitri and Indian national movement, which is a form of decolonialism. The movement was fought against the British colonialism. I will undertake this task at two levels. One, by establishing the relationship between Aurobindo and politics, and two, by exploring the relationship between Savitri and Indian national movement. Let me begin with the first. The political in Sri Aurobindo. Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das in 1909 defended Aurobindo Ghosh, who was implicated in the Alipur bomb case. In his appeal to the Honorable Judge, Das has made a prophecy. He says that Aurobindo will, I quote, will be looked upon as the point of patriotism, the prophet of nationalism, and the lover of humanity. Das adds, I quote again, his words will be echoed and re-echoed not only in India, but across distant seas and lands, unquote. There can be two kinds of prophecies, one that is yet to come true, or according to alternative, our adversaries may not come true, and the other that has come true. Of the later, there are two possibilities. One that has come true, which is recognized, and the other that, though came true, is not recognized. In this presentation, I want to pursue the last part of the second kind of prophecy, which has come true but has not yet been adequately recognized, especially about Aurobindo's as a poet of patriotism and prophet of nationalism. In pursuing the political aspects of Aurobindo, let me acknowledge that there is a spiritual and transcendental aspect in him. He himself declares in his letters on Savitri that his sort of symbolic epic Savitri has the aim of supramental yoga. So there are two divergent views, one by Das and the other by the author himself. One way of looking at these different interpretations is to see them as conflicting and try to resolve them either on this side or that, or organize them sequentially where both make sense in different time frames. The earlier Aurobindo interpreted as political and the later as spiritual, or even hierarchically, where spiritual is placed at the top and political at the bottom. The path to the later view is available in Aurobindo himself, who proposed the matter at the bottom and spirit at the top in his Life Divine. However, following my work on Rousseau on slavery and M.K. Gandhi on Bhagavad Gita, I will take the available resources from the text and other texts by the same authors and work on the primary text. In addition, wherever necessary, I will touch arguments supporting the general claim without text torturing. In the process, I might disagree with the author's claim here and there. I want to bend the text and the author without breaking it to make a different sense of the text. Keeping aside the author's claim about the spiritual aspect of the text, I want to pursue Chittaranjan Das's prophetic words about Aurobindo, namely, as the poet of patriotism and the prophet of nationalism, the lover of humanity. By enticing Savitri's distinguishing features to the Indian national movement, I want to elevate this massive movement to the global level and claim how, through this epic, the salient features of the movements can be claimed to echo and re-echo, not only in India, but across distant seas and lands. I want to claim that this modern epic is the prolegomena or an underlying manifesto of Indian national movement. The additional text for undertaking this is to make sense of an anticlimax by Bipin Chandra, the historian of modern Indian history. He, in his writings about the Indian national movement, says the following things about Indian national movement. One, he says it is the biggest mass movement modern society has ever seen. Two, having made this claim, he goes on to compare it with other revolutionary movements such as British, French, Russian, China, Cuban, and Vietnamese revolutions. He identified the distinctive feature of the movement in Gandhi's political strategy. Next page, please. Then he also says that this movement is not only relevant to India, it's also relevant to other society, as even Le Walesa consciously tried to incorporate elements of Gandhian strategy in the solidarity movement in Poland. Chandra says that the national movement is the only actual historical example of a semi-democratic type of political structure where state power was not seized in a single historical moment of revolution, but through prolonged popular struggle on a moral, political, and ideological level. He further adds a major aspect is the value on modern ideas on which the movement itself was based on the broad socio-economic and political vision of its leadership. Next. Acknowledging the extended purview of the movement, he says, the richness of the movement was not confined to politics alone. The period saw a breakthrough in Indian art, literature, music, science, and industry. Indian society as a whole was experimenting, and the creativity of the people expanded in every direction. Moving from the reality that is the national movement to the representation of it, he, however, confesses that the existing writings on the subject have failed to deal with or even discuss the strategy adopted by national movement. This made it, to quote, appear as if the movement was mere conglomeration of different struggles, or, in the case of its Gandhian phase, certain principles such as non-violence and certain forms of struggle such as satyagraha, picketing, etc., but without an overall strategy, unquote. One reason for this failure in the existing writings on the subject, points out Chandra, and I quote, is the largely untheorized character of national strategy. Untheorized character of national strategy, unquote. He goes on to attribute this to, I quote again, the leaders of Indian national movement, unquote, who were, quote, not theoretically inclined and did not write books and articles putting forth their political strategy in an explicit form, unquote. He contrasts this state of affairs to the leaders of the Russian and Chinese revolution. He goes on to allege that, quote, historians and other social scientists, as also contemporary commentators, have tended to concentrate on Gandhi's philosophy of life. But in fact, his philosophy of life had only a limited impact on the people. It was a political leader, and through his political strategy and tactics of struggle that he moved millions into political action, unquote. I accept Chandra's attempt at drawing a parallel between Russian and Chinese revolutions on the one hand and Indian national movement on the other. I too concur with him when he says that there are some distinct aspects like Gandhi's non-violence. Further, I agree with him when he says that the struggle against exploitation requires a strategy, and mere principles and philosophy of life are not enough. Here it is necessary to consider the act and agency involved in this discussion. The problem surrounding the Indian national movement is not with regard to the reality and activities in it, but a representation of this reality. Two is with regard to the agency, Indian national leaders. Unlike those from Russia and Chinese revolution are not theoretically inclined, so they did not theorize the strategy and the movement. This strategy is not theorized in what he calls as in the existing writings on the movement. Though for the sake of argument, I am ready to concede that historians, social scientists, and commentators tend to concentrate on Gandhi's philosophy of life and not his political strategy. Here, I reject Chandra's claim that the leaders of Indian national movement were not theoretically inclined and did not write books and articles putting forth their political strategy in an implicit form. This is very problematic for me. The reason why it is problematic is the problem is not with the leaders of the Indian national movement, but with the theories of Indian national movement. Most of the theories have not read the writings, have not taken into consideration the writings by these leaders. In fact, one of the unique features of the Indian national movement is that its leaders wrote extensively. Swami Vivekananda's writings are available in 9 volumes. Sri Aurobindo, 30. Gandhi's writings in 100 volumes. Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar in 30 volumes. This, in fact, provides an interesting combination of politicians as writers. The point that I want to make here is that there are politicians maybe much more better than the Indian national movement politicians. They're better writers than the writings of Indian national leaders. But politicians writing is and in such a such a wide varieties of themes is a unique combination that is available in 19th and 20th century. And one of the major problems in social theory on India, particularly in theorizing Indian nationalism, is that most of these writers have not taken these writings into consideration. They have not paid attention. In fact, one of the major things that happens is there is no reference to Tilak's Gita Rahasya. There is no reference to Savitri. There is no reference to many of the writings on, on national by the national leaders. This is the reason why it is not correct. I don't agree with Chandra that there is no theory proposed by these people. No, there is theory. The only reason is we did not look at the theory. We did not read the theory. We were engrossed in doing something else on this reality. In other words, this is the point that I wanted to bring into the discussion today. However, the theories on nationalism, including Chandra and others, have not factored in these writings. I want to claim that the vision of Indian national movement is symbolically rendered by Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. There is an astonishing or enigmatic silence of social scientists who did not read these writings to understand nationalism in India. That's the point that I'm trying to make. I want to claim that Savitri is a modern epic that reverberates like the collective unconscious archetypes of the aspirations of Indian national movement. Here, let me just elaborate on the point that I mentioned, that there are huge amount of writings by Indian national leaders, but not factored by the social scientists who theorized on this. I make a distinction between ready-made philosophy or making philosophy ready. Okay, philosophy across the world has performed both the roles. That is, there are ready-made texts. You have, Plato's Republic, Plato's Dialogues. You have Aristotle's Politics and Ethics. You have Descartes' Discourse on Method, Marx' Capital, and Rawls' Theory of Justice, and what have you. This is philosophy. But if you also revisit the activities of philosophy, you will also find a different kind or different kind of philosophy, activity in philosophy, and that is making philosophy ready. I find that this is what Plato was doing to Socrates. This is what Augustine and Aquinas did to Christianity. This is what Shankara did to Vedanta. This is what Dinaga, Dharmakirti, Nagarjuna did to Buddhism. Okay, so there are two kinds of activities. So even if you don't find in the writings of these people, the national leaders, philosophical strategy, philosophical theory, or social theory, to use the more contemporary respectable terminology, still it does not stop us from theorizing ideas and extracting ideas in the form of making philosophy ready, in addition to working with ready-made philosophy. Indian national leaders may not have written as systematically as the revolutionaries in Russia, in China, in France, in England or Vietnam. But it is not the case that they did not write. They are not crude fighters for the moment. They are the reflective and writing people doing, being active in the moment. That's the point that I'm trying to make. I want to claim against this background that Savitri is the modern epic that reverberates like the collective unconscious archetypes, a la Jung, the aspirations of the Indian national movement. In this context, I want to add that if you ask the question, what is the manifesto of Indian national movement? Definitely it is not Hind Swaraj, because Hind Swaraj does not reflect the Indians' infatuation with material life, with modernity. Indians want modernity. Gandhi shuns modernity in Hind Swaraj. So that is not a text that we would consider. It is not even Gita Rahasya of Tilak, because that takes into a different realm. It is not even Tagore's nationalism, because that becomes also too critical about a nation state. It's also not Discovery of India of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, that doesn't represent the cultural aspects are not factored as much as it is. But I find that it is worth exploring Savitri, Aurobindo Savitri, as a manifesto that distinctly or distantly reverberates the aspirations of Indian national movement, where you want both materialism, you want to incorporate modernity, yet have spiritualism from the past. That's my point. Now let me draw the parallel between Indian national movement and Savitri. First parallel is, like Savitri, India also lost its freedom. Like Savitri's loss, India too lost its freedom. Aurobindo describes Savitri's state of mind, who knows her husband's, when she knows her husband's impending death, Satyavan, to quote, "Now it was here in this great golden dawn, by her still sleeping husband laying she gazed into her past as one about to die, looks back upon the sunlit fields of life, where he too ran and sported with rest, lifting his head above the huge dark stream into whose depths he must forever plunge," and quote. This is the first parallel that I'm trying to make. There is, like Savitri, who lost her husband, India lost its freedom. Two, getting freedom from the British was as impossible as getting the dead alive. Like Savitri, Indian freedom movement was fighting to make the impossible possible. Nobody thought that India would get freedom. So, because the indomitable British are so strong that it was just not possible. Maybe there are various other reasons that could have happened, but then the sheer proportion between the victim and the victor is so disproportionate that it's a miracle that India got the freedom. It is as impossible as getting the dead into getting the dead back to life. So three, like her, who in her hours of deep sorrow manages the difficult transition from the emotive to the cognitive level, from grieving to the vigorous argumentation with Emma, which requires a high level of intellectual competency, cognitive competency. One of the important aspects that is associated with Savitri is that she, in the beginning, feels the pain of the loss of the beloved husband. But she does not exhaust herself in this loss and starts crying, as is generally associated with the loss. Instead, in order to deal with the third person who is entering into the scene, namely Yamadharmaraja, she moves from emotive to cognitive level. This is one of the distinguishing features associated with Savitri. Savitri's, the moving from the emotive to the cognitive level emotive cry and cognitive argumentation. Argumentation with whom? Not with other human beings, but the god of death, who is indomitable, whose decisions are indomitable. And that requires a very high level of competence, high level of cognitive competence. And she displays it, and not only displays it, but finally wins over the death by trapping him with his own, with her wit and argumentation. So, and she refrains, in Sri Aurobindo, you have two important insights. One is Savitri refrains from expressing her grief and agony for two reasons. One, to keep the death of her son from his mother. She speaks with caution and calm without giving any clue to keep the death of her son from his father, from his mother. To quote, she spoke, but with guarded lips and tranquil face, as some stray word or some betraying look should let pass into mother's unknown breast, slaying all happiness and need to live, a dire foreknowledge of the grief to come. Only the needed utterance passage found, all else she pressed back into her anguished heart and forced upon her speech an outward peace. The other reason for Savitri to refrain from expressing her grief and maintain calm is to lessen Satyavan's suffering. To quote again, all grief and fear were dead within her now, and a great calm has fallen, the wish to listen. His suffering, the impulse that opposes pain, were the one mortal feeling left, it passed. Griefless and strong, she waited like the gods. Unquote. The calm and grief, grief is for the sake of Satyavan, in our case, to save Indians who are under slavery and ready to express and fight against the British physically, as that will hurt the people of India. And this state, necessitated by internal reasons, is used to argue with Raghuramaraju. So like Savitri, who moved from the emotive to the cognitive, from crying to arguing, the Indian national movement moved from fighting the physical war to arguing with the oppressor and trapping them using their own liberal argument. So I want to claim that Savitri provides an important vision that can reverberate the aspirations of Indian national movement. My last point, which is very brief, and I need to work more on it. So, at the end, let me briefly point out that the death takes place in the forest. This is not incidental, and is just directly and immediately related to Satyavan's axing a tree, which symbolizes the destruction of forest, nature, and ecology. Aurobindo depicts this succinctly. He does describe the pain of death directly by comparing it to the pain of the living branch that he has axed. To repeat what I began with, Satyavan says to Savitri, Savitri, a pang cleaves through my head and breast as if the axe were piercing it and not the living branch. Such agony rends me as the tree must feel when it is sundered and must lose its life. And there is a larger symbolism when Savitri leaves the cut and damaged tree and moves towards the tree that has fortunate kingly trunk, a living tree. And that, to quote, then Savitri sat under branches wide, cool green against the sun, not the hurt tree, which his keen axe had cloven, that she shunned. She shuns the tree that he has axed, but leaneth beneath a fortunate kingly trunk. She guarded him in her bosom and strove to soothe his anguished brow and body with her hands. Unquote. Here one can discern the symbolism of moving from the site of death under the axed tree towards the tree that has a fortunate kingly trunk. The symbolism can reveal the movement from ecological destruction to ecological rebirth. The only rider is, for Aurobindo, this is not going to be confined only to the physical, but includes the supramental yoga that he claims is the purpose of his rendering of Savitri. So I have discussed why Savitri, and I gave a reason why that there are some distinguishing features of Savitri, and the feminism has to re-look at this character, not only from as promoting patriarchy, but coming up with a different version of, women's centrality. As I mentioned to you, that the centrality where the husband gets back his life because of a woman. The children are born at the instance of Savitri, and then she wins over the god of death. So all this shows that woman is strong, central, courageous, and has the capacity to move depending upon the requirement from the emotive to the cognitive. And I have related her to, I related Savitri through Chittaranjan Das, and somewhere bypassing even Sri Aurobindo's claim that it's a spiritual text, into Chittaranjan Das, who highlights how Aurobindo will be remembered as a prophet of patriotism, and related her. And that I wanted to elevate the status of Indian national movement using Aurobindo's Savitri as a text that reverberates the aspirations of Indian national movement, and pointed out the implications of Savitri to ecology. And in between, I also tried to show how, for instance, Sri Aurobindo's makes a very important intervention in making the text available for contemporary users by moving the text from text Savitri as a legend and also as a symbol. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, we have approximately 10 minutes. So just as a quick reminder, you can either raise your hand or type your question in the chat box and we will read it for you if you are not in a position to read it loudly. So I'll let Professor Singh, you are speaking, but I can't hear. Are you raising your hand? Yeah, okay. Can you unmute yourself to ask your question, please? We can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Professor Raghuramaraju, wonderful to see you here. And I was missing you for a fairly long time. Two quick questions I want to place before you. One is regarding decolonization. I was just wondering at the epistemic justice which has evolved through modernity to, through tradition to modernity. So do you find that when you take up the mythical reference like Savitri and others, then what kind of epistemic justice you are going to do? Are you really going to de-traditionalize everything? Or if you want to re-traditionalize it, then the supposed coloniality is to be, reopened up. You did try it with national movement, but Sri Aurobindo's national movement, I don't know, because you are talking about Gandhi's national movement or Sri Aurobindo's. Because Gandhi wanted to wipe up tears of everybody. But Sri Aurobindo had a different way of talking about nationalism. So please clarify this position. And also, if you can take up sadhana, vidya, and kala together, like life divine, human cycle, and the synthesis of yoga, and Savitri, then it makes a complete sense, because Sri Aurobindo has this kind of a thing that, vidya, sadhana, and kala go together, and it's just a way of life. And thank you, Alice, for giving me this opportunity. And over to you, Professor Raghuramaraju.
Yeah, thank you very much. One is that, in this second question, In this presentation, I am focusing only on Savitri. That exhausts me, as I stand today. And second one is that I'm interested in looking at the Aurobindo's version of national movement as the most viable representation of the aspirations of the people of India in their fight for independence. And the epistemic certification is dictated by the context of the colonialism.
Okay, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Vipul, you are next.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Raghuramaraju, for the talk. I would like to go back to footnote 5 on the PDF that you had on your screen, which said something like texts of Indian nationalism. It had 5 texts, either I think 5 or 6. Gandhi, Tagore.
Just 1 second, it's coming.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. Footnote number 5. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether this is part of what you were trying to do today or not, but I was just wondering what's going on here. What is the relationship you're drawing between these texts? Because these 5 people, thinking about them as being in some way fundamental to the Indian national movement is not new, but I just wanted to know what's going on between these texts, what sort of relationships, or is there a relationship that you are positing here? Thank you.
Okay. The relationship is that I briefly mentioned that Hind Swaraj, if you ask me what is the manifesto of Indian national movement, Hind Swaraj does not figure even remotely. It is a very prescriptive text. It is not a descriptive text. I'm looking for a descriptive text, and not crude descriptive text, or not even just a manifestation, but something that is reverberates. That's the word that I'm trying to refine now. I have to do more work on this. That reverberates the aspirations of Indian national movement in a very symbolic form. So I'm trying to now look at compare Savitri with Hind Swaraj, with Tagore's nationalism, with Nehru's discovery of India, with Ambedkar's annihilation of caste, and things like that. It's a larger work. It needs a different session altogether.
Okay, I have a question, and I think nobody else is there, so I'll take the opportunity. I would like to, thinking with you and in your paper, I would like to suggest a hypothesis to connect the ecology part with what you presented earlier. So I liked very much the critique that you make to political theory, which I think indeed are lacking a very important aspect of the decolonial movement, which is the aesthetics and like the literature in terms of, symbolism and the use of myth, which is important in India, which is not only, which has been also part of other cultures, but this aesthetic use of myth and the cultural images that speak to the people more than the political theories that we make at a certain point. And in that, so at the end, I wanted to submit to you whether you would agree that the ecology also is whether you find that there is something larger than Aurobindo. For example, Tagore has also very strong, relation of the human with nature and of the interrelational, deep connected connection between nature and humans with themselves, with nature at different levels, which doesn't function at all like that in the West, where we had the technological movement, like a rupture much stronger. So I wanted to ask you if this ecology also in Aurobindo, larger than Savitri, also is one of the very important characteristic of the Indian national movement in terms of the symbolism and metaphor. If you see that also as fundamental as Savitri herself as a character.
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. The implications of politics of national movement to ecology is a very, very large project And while working on this, I could just come across some references, some ideas here and there, but I have to put them in a very systematic manner. Immediately, I don't have an answer, but I recognize the importance of that project. Okay, but it needs to be very slowly and carefully looked at, because two things. One is India also needs development to eradicate its poverty. That's one of the claims of national movement. So immediately it cannot go back. Whether it can go back, and when it goes back, will the people of India move with that idea or not, has to be very carefully and analyzed. I see that, so that needs to be done.
Yeah, I don't mean necessarily going back, but this interconnection between the physical, what you also said for Aurobindo, between the physical nature and the human mind at a, universal, essential level. That is, I find often, I find it in Tagore, I find it in Aurobindo, I find it in different thinkers of that time, and I wonder if that can be a motive. Ecological in that sense, large, not only physical nature and, the Gandhi type, but in the larger sense of interconnection between humans and nature.
Yeah, just to make a small observation. One is, if you look at the political theory in the West, it is, anti-ecology to ecology. Now people are coming back to ecology. But if you look at the writings of contemporary Indian philosophers, you find the coexistence of both modernity and ecology. So there it is sequential, here it is simultaneous. So you need to factor the structural difference and start working on it. Bring, bland comparisons.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Okay, if there is a last question, we have 1-2 minutes more. Otherwise,
if you allow me, I can pursue the question of nationalism again. Because do you hear me, Alice?
Yeah. Sorry. I was confused on my screen, but you are able.
Professor Raghuramaraju, I was just wondering at this nationalism, which you did it, because 3 levels of nationalism. One which we find in the West, looking for the enemies within the society, the way Hitler did it, and it happened even in the Britain also, in Italy also. But the way nationalism Gandhi did it, wiping out the tears of everybody, and the way Sri Aurobindo is doing, elevating the Panchakosas and reaching to psychological, spiritual dimension of nationalism. So, in fact, Sri Aurobindo's position is not coming up that kind of a thing which I was looking for, presentation, because how far Savitri's symbolism and some kind of referent which is quite mythical, mythological kind of a thing can be brought up to this kind of realistic crisis which was there, and try to overcome out of it. Does it make some sense, Raghu, to you?
No, see, whenever you look at the manifestations are not description of reality, empirical reality. Manifestos are idealistic. So in that sense, you can't say that, this doesn't tally with what is happening. Manifestos are symbolic, universal, or, figurative. They're not literal.
Okay.
Okay, I would have a question, and please forgive me if it's a very ignorant question, because I'm new in India and I don't know much about Indian history, but nowadays when I follow Indian news, I hear the term nationalism a lot. It's very present, also in JNU, but everywhere else as well. Nationalism is very omnipresent. You also talked about nationalism and the national movement that was a post-independent or a movement towards independence and afterwards. So if we compare nationalism back then and nationalism today, do you think it's exactly the same? Or are there what are differences between contemporary Indian nationalism and nationalism, let's say 70, 80 years ago?
Michael, one is that the comparison between the present form of nationalism and the earlier form of nationalism is a very, again, needs to be explored more extensively. In this work, I'm trying to look at what happened before India's independence. What are the kind of a theoretical ideas, frameworks that are available earlier time before India, before India became independent? There are contesting theories of nationalism. Okay, so one nationalism that is not one nationalism that is available in Savitri but not recognized is what I'm trying to work in this presentation. Okay. What is happening now and is not, I'm not I'm not very good at the understanding contemporary developments and things like that. But definitely what is happening now, what happened post-independent India is not what was envisaged by the pre-independent Indian peoples.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Unmuting. Okay, so we are a little beyond time already, and I think there is no new question. So thank you so much, Professor Raghuramaraju, for again a very original lecture and insight. And I'm looking forward to your further work on the Indian national movement. And thank you so much, everybody, for being there. And we'll see you next month, I hope. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Raghu, anytime come to Delhi?
Yeah, I was there last week, but I just came for a day because I have a lot of teaching in this institute. So, being away for a long time, I
And next time, some
generally
leisure, with some freedom and some leisure if you come to Delhi. For a day, stay with us.
Definitely, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay, your health is all right?
Yeah, fine. Now it's fine. It's fine.
And you look perfect, yeah. So, fine, great.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.